The recent developments in forensic science has been incredible, particularly in the areas of genetics and DNA. These developments have allowed us to identify victims and criminals alike using microscopic pieces of evidence that would have previously been disregarded. However, like many things, forensic science isn't always 100% accurate or reliable, and there is always a possibility that human error or contamination can alter the results. The importance that society places on forensic science within the criminal justice system has increased greatly in recent years, particularly in cases where there is no other evidence or leads. Yet there are some cases, like the one we're looking at today, that leave us questioning both the accuracy of forensic testing methods and also how much importance the public, but more importantly jury members, should be placing on forensic science when reaching a verdict. On the 16th of January 2009, Linda Bonner came through her front door of her home in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to find her 68-year-old husband, Franklin, dead in the kitchen. The scene was disturbing. Their house was completely ransacked, and Franklin had been beaten, tied up, and bound to a table and chair with duct tape. The medical examiner's report showed that Franklin Bonner's cause of death was suffocation, likely due to the duct tape that had been tightly wrapped around his mouth, nose, head, and body. Initially, investigators believed the murder might have been linked to Franklin's connections to an illegal lottery scheme, since people involved in those kind of operations often carry large amounts of cash. The police searched the home and collected some important pieces of forensic evidence, including a total of 9 fingerprints and 1 strand of hair lifted from the duct tape found on the victim. The fingerprints were run through the national database at the time of the murder, but no matches were found. Without any leads to follow, the case ended up going cold. Fast forward to 2018. Angel Bumpass was a 23-year-old student working a full-time job while in her second year of nursing school. The young mother of 2 was awoken early one morning by detectives knocking on her door. A felony murder warrant had been issued for Angel in relation to Franklin Bonner's death. So, how did Angel become a suspect? Well, the process of identifying and matching a fingerprint is complicated and time-consuming. While no 2 fingerprints are the same, they can share minute similarities which can prove difficult to discern. Once a fingerprint has been collected at a crime scene, the process usually begins with the print being uploaded to a national fingerprint database. The system will analyse the print and highlight any possible matches to the collected print. In this case, Angel's fingerprints had been collected and added to the database when she attended court after not paying a parking fine. The fingerprints that get highlighted by the system as a possible match are then sent to a fingerprint technician, whose job it is to manually look and identify the characteristics in each of the highlighted prints and then compare that to the collected print in order to find agreements or disagreements between them. Following this, a second fingerprint technician reviews the evaluations and aims to provide independent verification based on their knowledge and expertise. Only if both technicians separately agree that there are a suitable number of agreements or similarities between the 2 fingerprints would it be considered a match. Cold case detectives had reopened Franklin Bonner's homicide case and retested the forensic evidence that had been collected 10 years earlier. Of those, 2 partial fingerprints were reported to match Angel, and both of these prints were located on the sticky side of the duct tape that was found on the victim's head. Since a match was made in this case, we can assume that there were enough agreements between the partial prints collected at Franklin Bonner's homicide scene and Angel's fingerprints. The state's theory of how and why Angel's fingerprints were at the murder scene shocked and confused the local community. The police theorized that Angel, just 13 years old at the time of the crime, participated in Franklin Bonner's murder, along with an accomplice. They believed the accomplice to be Mallory Vaughn, who would have been 26 at the time of the crime. It's important to note that Angel and Mallory always denied knowing each other and said that they had only encountered one another because of the investigation. So, while a fingerprint match and loose familial connections to the victim is what brought Angel into the investigation, the only thing tying Mallory Vaughan to the murder was the testimony of his cousin, a federal inmate who told authorities that Mallory had confided details of the murder to him. His story changed almost every time police spoke to him, but authorities still had the man testify at trial. Mallory's defense attorneys argued that the man was only testifying in order to get time taken off his prison sentence. Meanwhile, Angel's defense team attacked the credibility of the fingerprint evidence by presenting likely scenarios where Angel's fingerprint could have been left on the duct tape without her being involved in the murder. As it is impossible to determine how long a fingerprint has been on a surface or object, the defense wanted to highlight this to show that the prosecution could not be certain that Angel deposited her fingerprint on the duct tape at the time that Franklin Bonner was killed. Angel's grandfather took the stand and testified that at the time of the murder, he and his wife were helping to raise Angel. He worked as a handyman and occasionally worked in the victim's home doing odd jobs. He told the jury that as a child, Angel loved arts and crafts and could have easily used his duct tape for an art project, which he then took with him and unknowingly left at the Bonner home. To his knowledge, Angel's grandfather said he didn't think that Angel had ever gone inside Franklin Bonner's home. Meanwhile, the prosecution focused on the fact that the print was found on the sticky side of the tape, and argued that this had to have happened before the tape was ripped and put on the victim. Angel's lawyers also presented evidence that the then 13-year-old Angel was marked as present at school on the day of the murder, although it could not be confirmed exactly what time she would have left school. Her lawyers repeated to the jury the state was never able to provide any definitive evidence that 13-year-old Angel and 26-year-old Mallory had ever known each other or communicated, nor could they provide a reason as to how and why, with such a large age difference, friendship could have formed between them. Angel's defense team also raised issues of how the state handled and stored the forensic evidence. According to them, they never received a record of the chain of custody for the evidence, meaning that they did not know how many people had handled it or when they had handled it. The attorneys also pointed out that other forensic evidence collected from the murder scene has never been tested, including a strand of hair and other fingerprints that had been found on the duct tape. The prosecution rebutted these arguments, saying, quote, "They have nothing else. They know how damning these fingerprints are. There's no other way that these fingerprints are at the crime scene other than the fact that she was there and she was the one who wrapped this 68-year-old man up in duct tape while Mallory Vaughan ransacked the house." On the 3rd of October 2019, the jury deliberated for just over 4.5 hours before returning to the court to deliver their verdict. They found Angel guilty of first-degree felony murder and attempt to commit aggravated robbery. Mallory Vaughan, on the other hand, was found not guilty of both charges. A month later, an Angel was back in court. The judge sentenced her to life in prison for the murder charge and 8 years for the aggravated robbery. She won't be eligible for release until 2079. So, do you think that the jury got it right? How important do you think that the fingerprint evidence is? Are 2 partial fingerprints enough evidence for a conviction of murder? Love to know your opinions. Angel's new lawyers filed a motion of appeal almost immediately. However, the hearings keep getting delayed due to the coronavirus outbreak. It looks like her next court hearing will take place on the 26th of February. Meanwhile, Angel is serving her sentence at the Tennessee Prison for Women in Nashville. If you want to find out more about Angel Bumpass, I'll leave a link in the description to the online petition which is trying to get her a new trial.